Nice to see you. Dr. Scott Jensen here. I want to talk today about the matter of money in medicine. I want to talk about a couple different medications, and I'm not giving anybody specific advice. I'm just sharing my opinion as a physician and the articles that I read and what I come across, as well as input from my patients, but this is not specific advice. Okay, so this morning I received an article in my inbox, and it was by MedPage Today, MedPage Today, M-E-D-P-A-G-E Today, T-O-D-A-Y. And I get a fair amount of articles from them. I think they're considered a solid source of medical information. The primary source of this article, as identified in MedPage, was Journal of American Medical Association Internal Medicine. McDonald et al. Evaluation of oseltamivir used to prevent hospitalization in outpatients with influenza. And that was JAMA Internal Medicine 2023. So I want to leave you with a specific thought when I'm done talking today. And I'm going to start with it and finish with it. When you follow the money, more and more in the world of medicine, when you follow the money, you end up traveling to the world of big pharma. Do you remember The Wizard of Oz? Do you remember how follow the yellow brick road? Because. Follow the yellow brick road. And where did it lead to? It led to the Emerald City, that gleaming place of beauty and authority where everything was good. The wizard was in charge. Well, unfortunately, in the world of medicine, we're sort of being told something similar, but we don't end up with the same conclusion. We're being told, follow this road. Follow the road to more pills, more tablets, more research, and you'll end up in the land of pharma. But not everything is good. So let's just dive into this. I'm not interested in doing a deep dive in terms of the world of oseltamivir, which is Tamiflu, which was used for treating influenza, versus the world of remdesivir, which is also an antiviral agent that's been talked a lot about over the last 3 years. But I think we need to have you understand what happened with Tamiflu or oseltamivir and what happened to remdesivir, because I think it really matters. So this article says, Tamiflu, a bust for preventing flu admissions, meta-analysis finds. It's written by Ingrid Hein, June 12th, 2023. The researcher says, quote, I wouldn't prescribe it to an otherwise healthy person. So let's talk about this article. This article, again, Ingrid Hein, H-E-I-N, is the writer for MedPage, June 12th, 2023. Starts out, Tamiflu has not panned out for reducing the risk of influenza hospitalization. Goes on to say, over 6,000 patients across 15 studies who took oseltamivir, which is the generic term for the trade name Tamiflu, and those who did not. So it was those who took Tamiflu and those who did not. It was not significant in terms of what happened to them. Emily McDonald of McGill University was the researcher, and she said, I wouldn't prescribe it to an otherwise healthy person. It's not completely benign. It does cause uncomfortable side effects. It could be more harmful than just a nuisance side effect. Now, she's talking about Tamiflu, but in this article, she references another article. And interestingly enough, the other article she references was also printed in MedPage Today, but this one was printed about 9 months ago, September 19th, 2022, written by the same author, Ingrid Hein, H-E-I-N. That one was early Tamiflu linked to better outcomes for kids hospitalized for the flu. So just to summarize, 9 months ago, Ingrid Hein writes an article with a very positive headline saying, early Tamiflu linked to better outcomes for kids hospitalized for the flu. Now, a week ago, I get an article that, same author, she says, Tamiflu, a bust for preventing flu admissions. They're not exactly opposite headlines, but one seems positive and the other seems negative. So then I went back to the article that she wrote in September of 22, and she says this: early use of Tamiflu in children hospitalized with influenza was associated with better outcomes. And then she talked to the researcher. According to Patrick Walsh, MD of the Medical College of Wisconsin, 55,000 children treated with Tamiflu was linked with a shorter length of stay for hospitalization. But then in the text of the article, she says, a previous study conducted during the influenza A H1N1 pandemic showed a benefit with neuraminidase inhibitors in adults, but not in children. Well, that's what Tamiflu is. It's a neuraminidase inhibitor. So I went back to that previous study that they referenced. And that's an article that appears to be published in JAMA Pediatrics, September 19, 2022, 9 months ago. And the title of that one was Association of Early Oseltamivir with Improved Outcomes in Hospitalized Children with Influenza 2007 to 2020 by Patrick Walsh. That was the study that she references, and she referenced Patrick Walsh. And again, I'm talking about last September's article. But this is the article I'm looking at, and what I find is I find no evidence for who paid for the study. In this study, it says, the question, among children hospitalized with influenza, is the early use of oseltamivir associated with improved outcomes? And it goes on to talk, and it says, the results were this. Early use of Tamiflu in hospitalized children was associated with shorter hospital stay and lower odds of a 7-day readmission, ICU transfer, ECMO use, or death. So what we have is 3 articles here. One I just got within the last week, and that's basically saying Tamiflu was a bust. But in that article, they reference an article from last September, and that seems to say Tamiflu works to give better outcomes for kids that were hospitalized. And then I go back to the original article that she references, and I cannot find who paid for it. And that's where I want to go with this. You see, my reflections as a physician was when Tamiflu was first put out in the market, maybe 20, 30 years ago, it had a little bit of a honeymoon period where we thought, oh my, this would be helpful if we can shorten influenza, help people that get influenza and all that. But something changed along the way. So I thought I should do some research on that. So here's what it says in an article on WSB TV. Tom Regan, R-E-G-A-N, is reporting. This was on internet, and the article was entitled, it's out of Atlanta, Here's Why One Local Pediatrician Refuses to Give Tamiflu to Kids. So I think it's critical now we ask, when was that dated? That's dated January 15th, 2020. So I'd been referencing originally an article last week, so we're in June of 23, and that article references an article from September of 2022, same author. And then I went one layer deeper to the original article, which was a summary and an abstract and didn't tell me who paid for the study. So then I thought, well, I remember Tamiflu having sort of a pretty nice run. People were buying it, government was stockpiling it. And then something happened. Tamiflu fell out of favor. So let's go to this article, or this report, January 15th, 2020, Tom Regan on WSB TV. Now remember, January 15th, 2020, you hadn't heard about the pandemic yet. The pandemic really started to get its traction in February of 2020. In January, you could have maybe been tuned into a few scattered little news highlights. But this is what it says. More and more pediatricians have stopped prescribing popular flu drug Tamiflu to children, despite the flu outbreak, because of concerns about serious side effects. Channel 2's Tom Regan talked to Dr. Danita Sells from In-Town Pediatrics in Brookhaven, who said that Tamiflu doesn't seem effective in children and can often make them feel worse. Dr. Sells said, "There's more risks than benefits, and the side effects are usually not worth it. The most common thing is vomiting. It can be severe. They're vomiting 3, 4, 5 times a day and not able to keep anything down." That's what I remember. I remember Tamiflu humming along, doctors using it. I remember thinking, gee, the studies that were positive 5, 10 years ago were basically saying that if you use Tamiflu in people who had flu, it might shorten the symptoms by 1 day, but it could throw my patients into the twilight zone, stuff like that. You could also use it for prophylaxis. Again, Tamiflu is an antiviral. Its generic name is oseltamivir. And I'm sure that you cannot help but think about remdesivir. And that also is an antiviral. And remdesivir during the COVID pandemic was used ambitiously and aggressively with lots of favorability reports for a while. But then it seemed to not be. So I did some research on that this morning. I went to the NIH COVID-19 treatment guidelines page, last updated April 20th, 2023, which is just 2 months ago. And I wanted to know, what is the NIH saying about remdesivir right now? And it says, remdesivir can cause gastrointestinal symptoms, nausea, elevated transaminase levels, which are liver enzymes, an increase in prothrombin time, which means you could bleed easier, and hypersensitivity reactions. Then it goes on to say that before starting patients on remdesivir, the FDA recommends performing estimated glomerular filtration rate studies, liver function studies, and prothrombin time tests. Well, let's just go over that. Glomerular filtration rate, the GFR, is a kidney function measurement. And they're saying remdesivir can damage the kidneys, so before you use it, check the kidneys. It also says check liver function because it can mess up the liver function test. So before you use it, test the liver function. And then it also says check the pro time or the prothrombin time because if that's elevated because of the drug, then you can bleed easier. That's what it's saying about remdesivir. It goes on to talk about remdesivir in a way that's relatively objective, but it doesn't give you a glowing sense of, wow, that's got to be the best drug since sliced bread kind of thing. Here's the deal. I got an article within the last day or two in my inbox on Tamiflu being a bust for preventing flu admissions. That sounds negative. In the article, the author references a previous article that she had written 9 months ago that sounded very positive. Early Tamiflu linked to better outcomes. But the basis for that article was a study done by Dr. Patrick Walsh, MD, JAMA Pediatrics, published September 19, 2022, evaluating kids in the hospital with influenza from 2007 to 2020, involving 55,799 kids. And I wanted to know, what was the cost of the study that Dr. Walsh and his colleagues did? What's the average cost of a similar study like that? And I want to know who paid for the study. Did Big Pharma pay for some of the study? Did the government pay for part of the study? Was the study funded by the university? Was it funded by a private organization, perhaps a nonprofit? See, I think that COVID pandemic did lots of bad things and some good things. There's some things we can learn. And one of the things we have to learn is that in the world of medicine, more and more, when you follow the money, you end up in the land of Big Pharma. That makes me worry. It makes me worry because in The Wizard of Oz, the people who lived in the land of Oz that were controlled by the Emerald City were the Munchkins. I worry that today it isn't just patients that are being the pawns. I worry that today doctors and patients are the pawns in the big chess game of healthcare dollars and profits. When I see these studies go from Tamiflu being a bust to Tamiflu being helpful, and then going back to the original source and not being able to find out where the funding came from, or maybe not readily, easily being able to find that out, I think it's time that we start to think about medical research differently. I think medical research has been turned upside down. There have been editors of high quality medical journals that have been saying this for 5, 10, 15 years, that medical research is too often being paid for by big pharma. There have been editors of major medical journal publications that have said it's absolutely critical that before a study is initiated, it should be registered with medical journals so that the medical journals can follow that study and make certain that the results of that study are reported regardless of whether the results are favorable to whoever funded the study. In other words, if Big Pharma wants a study to be done and they're going to pay for it, register the study and require that the researchers publish the results regardless of whether or not the results gave the kind of data and conclusions that Big Pharma might want to see. I've told you before, researchers are always concerned about where is their next research project going to get its funding. Big Pharma and big government are the two largest sources of funding, either directly or indirectly, for medical research. I am not trying to pick on Big Pharma, but the world of medicine has changed so dramatically. Our medical research constantly has a slant to it, and part of that slant is born of the fact that physicians can no longer have the same confidence that the data that we're seeing is legitimate, high-quality data that hasn't been tarnished by the potentially nefarious agenda of Big Pharma. I think that every article should list at the top of it what the cost of the study was, what the typical cost of this kind of study would be, and who paid for it. I think that would help us. In the meantime, I think that when you follow the money in the world of healthcare, you're going to be surprised at how many times you land up in the land of Big Pharma. Thank you.